Welcome to the Childhood Potential Online Montessori Conference, and thank you so much for accepting our invitation to be the speaker again at our conference.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Perfect. I will say a few words about you. You are an artist, you are a mom of already adult children, but still a mom. You are a homeschooling parent. You are an art trainer, you are a curriculum developer, you are the founder of Nature of Art. You are an author of several books, one of them being The Way Children Make Art and Montessori Guide. You are international Montessori art trainer. You run the Art Teaching Blueprint, a Montessori certification program that is offered worldwide. On your website, you offer video trainings, some for free, some for a few dollars, for parents when it comes to Montessori and art. What did I forget? What do you want to add? Tell me more.
Yeah, if you guys are watching, please go to my Montessori-art.com and join my art newsletter. I write every week and give free advice for early childhood to primary grades to elementary. But there is a button at that website, the art newsletter. It'll ask you some questions and join that. You'll get to have all kinds of fun information and know when my new books are coming out.
Perfect. Today we are supposed to talk about art with babies and toddlers. Can we actually do art with children in this very small age?
So you can do art with little kids. It's a little different and it's gonna be more playful and what I call process-based, but actually you can do art with kids. I think there's a lot of ideas about kids making art, but today I wanna share all kinds of fun ideas on how we can actually prepare our children and really get the right information in front of them, like the right storybooks, the right toys, the right, manipulatives that they can play with, and just kind of a primer on how to get started. And I'll give you that information today.
Are there any misconceptions about art that we have as parents? Is there something that we are, in a way, getting wrong?
So I do get this all the time. And yes, even in primary grades, I have a lot of parents and teachers that have the misconception that children are able to actually create artworks and design stuff. But really, when it comes to 0 to 3, the misconception is we're not supposed to have them actually making stuff. We're just in what's called the introductory phase. Also, having your children having the pressure of a parent or a teacher feeling like kids are supposed to produce something, that's a misconception, is having our children create something to prove that they're actually learning something, and I know that's one of the things that I hear all the time, that parents feel guilty because their child can't make something pretty, and really, they're not supposed to be doing that, not at these ages, probably elementary.
So, how do we get started?
All right. Well, I think the way we get started is understanding that there's an actual term. It Some of you in the audience may be artists and went to fine art school and understand this term, but I'm going to break it down for parents and teachers who have never heard these terms before. So there's this big long word called the elements and principles of design, but I shorten it up and I call it art literacy. And really, when we think about our children going to school and they learn language arts and they learn mathematics, they learn the literacy of that language. Well, visual arts actually has its own literacy. And I think that's where we start by telling parents there's actually terms and words that children need to learn. And what that is what we actually see. So if you look at a piece of artwork and you want to talk about it, you have to use what I call art words, art literacy words. And so that's where we start with children is first learning what these art literacy words are, and there are words. So let me give you an example. You're probably using them already, and you probably didn't even know it. So in the art world, we learn the art elements, and that's a shorter way of saying that too. So we have the long word, the elements of principles of design, shortened up art elements or art literacy. So it all means the same. For example, lines. We think about lines in artwork. There's straight lines, there's zigzag lines, there's swirly lines. That's actually an art element that every artist needs to learn, and if you look at any piece of artwork, there's lines in it. The other one is color. Color you're teaching your children color and, the rainbow, the colors, but actually that's art literacy. Teaching them what red and yellow and, it can go as far as primary colors to terry colors. It can get really advanced. The other things are shapes. All their toys and all their puzzles are different shapes. There's organic shapes made from nature, and there's geometric shapes. So, if you think about shapes, how many shapes are there? There's triangles, there's circles, there's rectangles. That's art. Those are art elements that we're teaching children. So, they're really basic things that we're exposing our children to. Let me give you another example of value. Value is the shade of a color. So there's a dark red, a light red, a medium red, a darker red. That's value. So those are the terms that we're actually trying to introduce for our children, and that's art literacy.
So, what are the first steps that we can take?
I think, first of all, don't rush out and get a bunch of art supplies and paints because I know that parents get really nervous about messy paint and they don't know what direction. You can get some art supplies. The safest art supplies for children are like paints, finger paints, clays, especially for that age. I'm going to say just stick to paint, no drawing material because they're too tiny to hold drawing materials, but maybe just like some watercolor paints or finger paints and maybe some thick clay. But I would get storybooks, to be honest with you. I'd get some really fun, go to the library, get a bunch of chunky storybooks and start reading to your child because one, you're going to be reading to them to actually teach them how to speak and giving them, language arts, but you're also going to be able to point out the artwork in the books. People don't realize that all the children's books have beautiful artwork, and all the beautiful artwork is art literacy words that you can practice. You can open up a book and start pointing out like the red balloon, do you see the red balloon? It's round. You can start talking to your child. So I'd say start with storybooks first, and then I would go get some art supplies. Not Now, you can actually get art supplies and have them as toys. People don't even actually think about that. You can get some fun paintbrushes where the baby can start learning to grasp it and kind of sweep with it and play with it. You can get shapes of toys that are very specific to art language. Like I'm sure some of you might have puzzles that have shapes in them, like triangles and squares and rectangles, and really looking at it as a playful thing. You can get paper, you can get crayons, things that they can play with, but they're not going to be actually capable yet of grasping and holding them yet. But you can have those things in shelves and baskets that they can play with. And so, if you can think of art literacy introduction for a 0 to 3-year-old child, it's really about introduction, just play. You know, I always talk with the teachers that are in some of the schools, and I say, just put baskets of the toys. Don't feel like you have to bring the paint out yet to play with. Put the paintbrush in the basket one day. Put some color, put some of your alphabet toys and some of your toys that are maybe one day you can focus on one color like red. Get some red toys out, or maybe you can even slow it up at home. Maybe once a week, introduce one letter while you're reading and reinforcing that language and the toys that go along with that.
Can you tell us maybe a little bit how the child development goes when it comes to art? How does the child develop all of his abilities to do things when it comes to art?
Yeah, and it's really fascinating. Actually, I spent a lot of years studying this. It's one of the things I'm very good for. Explaining I have a new book that I want to just kind of bring up
Mhm.
because I'm gonna talk a little bit about this book. It's called The Way Children Make Art, and it's actually the scientific way that I studied over 30 years how children process visual arts cognitively. So let's talk about that. Um, the first thing you need to know is art is very visual, okay? And visual meaning when the child is learning what things are in their environment, they don't actually know what things mean. Or so if an infant sees a bike roll into a bedroom, they see the wheels and the bike, they don't actually know what that means. And it takes a couple years for them to understand what a bicycle is, that it rolls, you can jump on it, you can ride it and use your energy. They're understanding the things that are in your house. Let's say that you have like a broom or a vacuum. They don't actually, when they first see it, they don't understand. It's the same way with visual arts. When they see the art materials, they don't, they're abstract ideas for them. And so our way of understanding how children evolve visually is they see things and then they see them in action and they start to understand what those things are. But um, when it comes to visual arts, as long as that takes to learn that, it takes the same way to teach a child to draw and paint. And that's kind of what I want to make clear is you have to give children time to evolve into understanding what things that they see actually mean. And that's how we need to teach them the art elements. Fine motor, it starts out very gross. They have no control of their hands, but over the years they start to grasp things, they start to get control, they start to have movement. So in visual arts, one of the three things that I'm always looking at when I teach infants and toddlers is their visual perception and their fine motor. Can they grasp something? Can they control it? And that's really what I'm trying to focus on. And then cognitive processing, their memory. So when a child sees a paintbrush for the very first time, there's no memory in their mind what it is or what they're using it for. It's our role as a parent to show them what the paintbrush is. And that's how their memory will start to evolve. They'll have memories of the motion of sweeping, the motion of picking it up. And so if you can think about young kids at these ages, is we're just introducing and we're looking at the three things that they're progressing in their the visual perception, their fine motor development, and their cognitive processing. Another thing that people don't realize about visual arts is it's very movement. There's fine motor movement. Semi-motor movement is very key in visual arts. Visual arts develops a lot of movement, meaning they have to balance, they have to scan, they have to hold things. And that's why I always say visual arts is perfect for helping kids develop healthy cognitive processing because there's a lot of action in making art, and especially 0 to 3, they're balancing and doing a lot of holding things and trying to control things.
Thank you. You talked about how us and parents are sometimes worried about all the mess that the children make. I have two questions that come with that. My first question is, what is actually our role as parents during the art activities, except the fact that we are actually preparing the tools and the paper? And my second question is how we can actually handle the messiness of art activities, because I think that's a very common question of most of the parents. I don't want them to play with the finger paint because then the paint is everywhere, including all the walls.
The mess first because it's always everyone's concern. They see pictures on Pinterest of all these kids splattering paint, and honestly, um, managing paint and art is very manageable. You just have to think small, which is one of my biggest tips is it does not have to be this finger painting. You can actually I have a paintbrush right here, I'm gonna grab it. You can actually shrink down a lot of people think paint is this splattering, splashing, but you can actually give a baby a very tiny, this isn't a small paintbrush, but you can give them little paintbrushes and little cups of paint, and you can reduce it down. If you're at home, you could do it in the kitchen or you can do it outdoors in the patio. If you're in a classroom, you can do it where you do most of your cooking. If you imagine kids cooking and eating, they're in areas that are washable and easy to make a mess and wipe up. But you can actually do art by not buying messy art supplies. You can get little paint trays that don't spill, like dry cake paints is one of my favorites. If you guys check out my books and my blogs, I'm always showing parents it does not have to be buckets of paint. Get that out of your mind. I see sometimes pictures of people putting kids on a blanket and letting the kids start smearing paint. That is you can do that if you want, if your child likes that, but that's not what you need to do. You can actually give them little tiny portions of art supplies. Paint art art at home can be very manageable. You just have to understand it doesn't have to be crazy. Don't look at those pictures that you see on Pinterest. I always see people like with splice water splatting paint all over the house. I wrote a blog recently on how to stop children from drawing on the walls, and it's at one of my websites. You can check that out. But there's so many things that we can do. I will say that I know that most of the time when kids make crazy messes, because we leave them, and this answers the next question. So usually parents will set up a table and put our supplies and then put their child there and just kind of think that their child's going to teach themselves. And they can't do that. They need us to model. And in these ages, I really think modeling as a parent. So I always give the advice of, so if your child sees you sweeping around the house, they always want to do it because they see what you're doing and they know what the broom is for. So we have to model. So if we want to teach children how to draw and paint, we have to sit with them, not set them up and walk away and ask them to do it. We need to sit there and actually model and actually pick up a paintbrush and make brush strokes and show them how to dip and how to, make controlled marks and play with them. We can't just set them up there and leave them to their own device, because guess what will happen? They'll take it and walk over to the couch and the wall and paint the wall. So I always definitely want to tell you, here's where I say modeling as a parent and play, just it's you don't have to be making pretty images. You just have to be showing the child, this is a paintbrush that we dip into paint, and then we take it and we make marks on paper or a canvas. And by modeling, they'll learn that. And also they'll learn the tips on what messes are allowed to do. Same thing with crayons and markers and pastels and oil pastels. You show the child, we grab it, we grasp it, we make elements, our elements, we make shapes or lines or zigzags. And by that modeling, that's how I've been very successful for many years in my infant and toddler classes, is teaching. Parents will come and they'll watch me sit at the table and start playing with the kids. And they'll be amazed that the kids can actually do it because they didn't realize, oh, I can model this. So definitely modeling, I would start with.
Thank you. Except of modeling and taking care of the environment and of the child when he's working, is there something else that you think is important that we need to keep in mind as adults?
Well, first off, all art supplies are very toxic and they're not safe. We all know that children at that age are mouthing and putting things in the mouth. So that's why I recommend you first model and the play with some art materials, because as you remember what I said, children have no memory of what these materials are for. And we have to show them that these are things that we're using or not eating with. So first off, art supplies are toxic, and there are a lot of earth-friendly, non-toxic art supplies, but they're still not good for kids to put in their mouth. And so we want to make sure, you're starting off with earth-friendly, non-toxic, safe paints, clays, crayons, all those things that infants and toddlers are exposed to can come. You can even make your own clays. You can make your own paints. You can even use a blender and use fruit if you just want to expose your child to painting. You want to make sure it's super safe. I do beets and all kinds of different veggies, carrots. You could turn it into water and actually play with it. You can use yogurt. I don't like to use food that the child is using all the time to eat, because then they get confused thinking it's okay to eat the materials. But start off with very safe and earth-friendly materials. And then as far as, the advice for parents is, first look in your environments, like in your home, like where do you want these things to take place? There's a lot of cute little tables that you can buy. I always say, make sure you have a space that is designed for getting messy. So if it's in your house, make sure it's on an area where if spilling happens, you're okay with it. Or you have a patio or outdoor or basement. Um, Set those expectations right away for you as a parent or a school, so you are comfortable with that happening. Um, Design low tables, find a low table that your child can walk around, and always put the activity on the table, because if you don't specify where that happens, it always happens on the floor or in the house. Um, I always tell parent I was a homeschool parent for many years, and um, it took me a long time to learn this, that I didn't require my kids to do activities in a certain area, and I regretted it. They painted my couch, they painted my walls, and they made all these messes. But right away, I after years of doing that, I was like, "Okay, kids, if you want to paint, it happens on the kitchen table. That's it. That's where it goes. And when they're done, we put it away. Or if you're gonna draw on paper. You're not gonna draw on yourself, and you're not gonna draw on the walls. So you have to think ahead of time, like, okay, I if you're working on this environment that you have set up for other activities, you also have to think about art. Art is a little bit different. I treat art like cooking. So whatever wherever you do cooking, you should probably do art. It's wet, it's slippery, it's messy, I would recommend, you just give yourself some time to think about those activities. And outdoors, art can be done in the park, art can be done in the backyard. Um, children can learn to do art elements in nature. You can go to sand and do elements. You can create things with nature. You can go out and collect leaves and sticks and make art outside. So it's not just, in the kitchen or in the house messy.
Mhm. How do we know that it's time to introduce something more complex materials or more complex scissor work, different brushes or different kind of clays, while still maintaining the safety and while still keeping in mind the age of the child?
Yeah. So there's a couple ways you could do that. One, you can give yourself a schedule and say, okay, this month I'm just going to introduce one thing and then rotate it out into like you can look at if you're a parent that has a schedule of lessons that you're rotating through the year, you can look at it that way. You can say, okay, couple weeks we're going to bring this out and do this, and then I want to expose my child to different things. Or you can do what I do in my art classes. I watch the children how they're developing. If I see a child, okay, so usually when I do art with toddlers, I have their attention for like a minute to 10 minutes. They don't have the focus. They'll come and they'll grab materials and just throw it around and play with it and then take off. And so their attention span is very low. And I call that like if you can time and keep introducing these things, and they start focusing and looking and actually paying attention to what's happening, like, oh my god, that paint is making a line. When you start seeing their attention span, you know that they're processing this information and they might be ready and interested. And when you start reading those storybooks and you're reading and you're pointing out the elements and you start seeing them like circle and making the shapes, you know they're ready to go to the next level. Like, okay, my child understands that the shape and they actually made the movement. Now we can try to make the shape together and play with it. So that's how you do that is you pay attention to their attention span. So for infants and toddlers, I recommend 20 minutes at the max. Their attention is not going to sit long enough to do anything. When your child can sit, and this is the key thing, and I have it in all my books, I do explain that. When your child can sit more than 20 minutes and focus, they're ready to be moved to the next level. They're ready for art lessons. They're ready to get scissors out because then they have the attention and the concentration, and you'll start to as your child grows, you'll start to notice her concentration. And that's when you know, "Okay, it's time."
That was actually one of my next question. How do you think that art and art activities can help build the concentration, the patience, the attention span in very young children?
Well, one of the things that I will say that's very important about visual arts is and you'll love this answer because a lot of parents don't realize that doing visual arts and handcrafting with your hands it regulates stress and it's relaxing and calming. And that is very important to know that children enjoy doing art and it's a stress reliever and it takes a lot of concentration to do art. A lot of guides will ask me, I can't get the kids to focus, they're running around, and I can't get them to sit down. But you'll know when you see a child that's sitting down and they start to like focus onto what they're working on, that concentration happens. So when they're ready to do that, it's our role as a parent or the guide to prepare the time and the space for them to not be interrupted. And that meaning meaning you don't want to take your child and say, okay, we're gonna go to the park and play with our friends. When they're in the middle of doing that, you have to respect their time. So maybe you can build the time like, okay, I'm gonna bring out some art supplies, but I know that I want my child to get concentration and work on those things, I'm gonna make the time for that. Every week or twice a week or once a day is art time. And so you build into those times in the day where they have the time to concentrate and do those things.
Very often, parents ask, how do they actually display the art activities? Like, usually you have different Montessori materials on a shelf, so the child can choose them when they are interested. How do you do that with art?
So I have that's so fun because I've been working on that for the last few years. I have designed an art shelf and how to stage it. There's actually a way that I've after spending the last 10 years in all different types of Montessori schools internationally, I was able to understand that most people don't have an art shelf, but you actually can have an art shelf. And I've been teaching parents how to stage that and guides how to stage that by looking at the other areas of your shelves. You do rotate things and you do put those things out um, for engagement. You can do that with the visual arts. You can have an area or a section of your shelf because if you're at home, I know you don't have all the shelves like a school classroom does, but you can say, okay, I'm going to have a focus of visual arts, and I'm gonna plan that my child is going to be exposed to those art elements, and you can learn what those art elements are by saying, okay, I'm going to teach them the language of the elements by I'm gonna go get like 5 or 6 storybooks and put them in the shelf. I'm gonna have the same things that the activities that they can do along with that, like drawing materials to make lines, and I'm gonna focus on colors, I'm gonna focus on shapes, and I'm gonna have little activities in there, and you can rotate those out throughout the year. My book does give a lot of advice on doing so I have 5 areas that I teach in, which is very important to actually bring good quality art literacy. I teach in 5 areas. I teach in drawing, painting, crafting, clay modeling, and color mixing, which is color theory. And I believe that all children, if they're exposed to all 5 of those areas, they're getting a high quality visual arts literacy program. And so you can look at those areas and say, maybe this month we'll play with painting, and then I'll change those materials out, and I will be using it, introducing those art language and those elements to my child. Then the following week, we'll do clay, and we'll talk about shape and form and different colors in that, and you can change those things out. As your child grows, at first, they're not old enough to play with those things. You're just playing with them and exposing them and giving them the toys. But as they start growing, you're gonna start noticing they can start using the materials and their attention is getting focused. Then you can start doing little baby lessons where you're modeling and doing the lesson with them. We don't want to require, remember at this age, we don't expect anything out of them. We just are doing what I call exposing and introducing, and I do have a couple of points. I do wanna hold on, I have them somewhere in my notes right here on my computer. There we are. I do wanna point out the 4 things that we're doing with infants and toddlers. We're introducing our element words. We're introducing materials. We're introducing what mediums are, and we're introducing the cause and effect, what's happening. So if you think of those 4 areas with this ages, that's what we're doing. We're focusing on the words, our element words, focus on the new materials, we're focusing on the mediums and what they do, and then we're focusing on the cause and effect. Like if I make a brush stroke, what happens with the paint? It drips or it's wet. That scientific part happens at the end. So that's all you're doing at these ages.
There are lots of different craft boxes already pre-made that you can buy in the store and you can create something. What do you think about these pre-prepared activities?
I think they serve their purpose for filling in fun activities or time, to focus on that, but they're not good for everyday art literacy because what they're doing is they're teaching you as a parent that there needs to be an outcome, and they're teaching the child that there's a right and a wrong way to do art. And so I always say you need in these ages from 0 to 3 and 3 to 6, you need to be focused on process-based art. And process-based art is really experimental and discovery, and there's no outcome. There's no way it has to end at the end. I do write a lot about that in my blogs. I try to help parents and teachers identify that process-based is very healthy for children. Um, Once in a while, you might wanna break out a kit, we get them as presents as birthdays and Christ you take those on vacation and, pop them out, or if you have a bunch of friends that come over and kids and you want them to do something, but having them follow directions and say, "Okay, this is the way it's supposed to be," that's where you get into trouble with the young kids is, it's not healthy for kids to be doing crafts, what I call cookie cutter crafts that, have to resemble a finished product. It takes away from their innate creativity. You will not raise, and that's one of the things I've been writing for 25 years, is creativity comes from solving their own problems. And if you are giving them step by steps to follow what that solution is, there is no way a child will grow up to be creative. And so you want to stay away from those things. Use the materials in it. Like I get kits, people give me those kits and I take them all apart and I put them in little bins and baskets and things. And I tell my children, my students, whatever you want to do with it is fine with me. Use it as an element or crafting, glue it here, collage it here. But don't worry, you don't have to make it look like this perfect butterfly that's on the instructions. I mean, if you
Mhm.
want to, fabulous.
Perfect. Is there something else that you want parents to know that maybe we didn't say, but that you think that is important for us to know?
Yeah, so I'm a parent and I know when my kids are young, I had these inhibitions that I wanted my kids to be smart and inventive, and I wanted them to, solve the world. And which we all want that for our children, but we as parents get in our children's way of being creative. And so my what I'm going to say to right now is the advice I have for parents and children is don't be the roadblock to creativity by making too much suggestions. Give yourself the time to let your children play. Let them experiment. Let them be a tinker. Let them take the clay. You might have an idea like, oh, I bought this clay and I thought we would make, volcanoes. If your child takes the clay and makes something else, like a character in something they're watching on TV or playing with, don't say, you can't do that. We need to do this. You need to be as a parent, because this is what I find why children are not creative, because parents and teachers are stifling children by our expectations. So if you can raise your child and just let them experiment, let them explore, let them tinker, you're going to be surprised that they'll solve their own problems and creativity just happens. Um, that's the number one tip I would say is, okay, so I'll give you an example. Some guides will put out, I'm gonna put I'm gonna stage the shelf, I'm gonna put a sample on the table, and I'm gonna show them a demonstration and how this material works, like collaging. I'm putting tissue out and scissors out, and I'll demonstrate how to cut and how to glue, and we'll put it on the paper, and then voila, we have the art. And then when you see a child start cutting the cardboard instead of the paper, you have parents like or teachers going, wait, stop, you're not doing the steps." And that is where we start. We have to be able to let kids cut the cardboard and cut the wrong paper and make the mistake to solve their own problem. So if you can just kind of have some patience and know that there is no right or wrong way in visual arts. Not till they get Not even till they get into high school do we start directing like, "Oh, you're doing that wrong." You really want their childhood to be a very experimental and exposure. So you do the job by bringing the materials and talking about the elements and focusing on it. But we can't require them to say, "Okay, I just taught you all this. I want you to do that. I want to see this." You have to say, I'm gonna expose you to this. I'm gonna take you to the museum. We're gonna play, but I'm not gonna take you home and make sure that you make that. Yes, just try to be soft on yourself. Parents are very ambitious. I know I was very ambitious. I had my daughter at 4 doing puzzles and reading, and I was doing too much because I thought that there was so much I had to do in such a short day, but I didn't realize her playing outside and climbing trees was just as important.
Thank you, and thank you for the whole interview.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited that a lot of parents are interested in doing art with their children. It's so much fun. I mean, it's part of our human innate abilities. It's just as important, I say, as doing math. So I hope that you make the space and create these opportunities for your children. I have lots of resources online, so check them out.